Hi, it's Lisa from Lisa's Sanctuary, answering questions about my healing journey, domestic violence, relationships, and a lot of things that I didn't expect to experience, and just things that, I could never have known, things that I know now, but obviously didn't at the time. And victims' compensation I have found to be a really interesting experience. So I experienced childhood abuse in which I did charge the person when I was about 12. I made a disclosure, pressed charges, made a statement, then I pulled out of that one because I wasn't in a position to go. I was 12. So I then went back to police, made another statement when I was 14, and proceeded to go to trial at court. And when I was on the stand, when I was 15, when I testified at court, when I was on the stand, I remember his lawyer had several different arguments for, the way that he questioned me and tried to, undo my story and that. One of the things was victim compensation. His lawyer brought up that I had basically fabricated the charges, the incidences, because I was seeking victims compensation. And I remember thinking, I have no idea what victims compensation is. It had not been mentioned to me. I didn't know anything about it. My family wasn't aware of it. We hadn't put in a claim for it. And so that was a bizarre comment to me. So I testified when I was 15. He was subsequently acquitted due to a number of different things with court that I now know was pretty not right. Things weren't right. But anyway, so he was acquitted. And later on, that was when I was 15, and it wasn't until I was 21, maybe about 20, that I heard, I sort of heard something about victims' compensation, decided to look into it, and found out that I was eligible to put in a claim for victims' compensation, even though he had been acquitted. So if I could provide evidence, my statement of a psychologist, report of things I said, there was still a possibility that I could be eligible for victims' compensation without a conviction. And so I had to apply for out of time guidelines. So that was approved. So first I had to get approved to apply out of time because it had been, more than, I think it was about 2 years at the time you had to put in a claim for victims' compensation. Obviously that was well out of the 2 years. So I did first get approval to apply out of time, and then I had to apply for victims' compensation. And I sent in, my police statement, other police statements I had from other witnesses at the time. The psychologist did a huge evaluation, that was another interesting experience, because for me, whenever I spoke to psychologists, more things would come up, and it was quite an unpleasant experience when I was still really early on in my, understanding of what I'd experienced and my recovery, my healing journey from it. And so I pulled together all of those things. Victims compensation, victim services did also require the court transcript. My court transcript could not be located. It was another really bizarre thing. And so it was probably about 12, maybe 18 months later, after I submitted all of this evidence, that I got a letter back to say that my victims compensation claim had been approved. And more so than, what any amount of money that they gave me was it was being believed. It was, even though he wasn't found guilty, even though he was acquitted, victim services believed, me enough. They believed that it had happened enough that they did approve my claim and give me a sum of money as compensation for what I'd experienced. And so that was actually more important to me than getting the value, the dollar amount of money, was that recognition of, that something had happened to me, and that even though he wasn't found guilty in court, yeah, a panel of people believed that it had happened. And so that was interesting. And so I did get, it was a decent amount of money. It wasn't, I didn't grow up, wealthy, so it was more money than what I had ever received in a lump sum, was more money than I'd ever held in my bank account, in my entire life. So it was a decent, it was decent. Not enough for a house deposit, not enough for, just the small things. I went on I took my kids on a holiday to another state. We went to Queensland, we went to the theme parks. I paid off, a small personal loan, $2,500 personal loan that I had for a car. I had a couple of thousand on a credit card that, I paid off. So there was some money there. But what I find most interesting is that I thought that I could change my life with this amount of money. Like I said, it was more than what I'd ever held at one time. I thought I was going to change my life. But what I've learned now is that love and relationships and money are, tied very closely to your own self-worth and what you believe that you are worthy and deserving of. And so I remember, I went through that money. I didn't do anything overly substantial with it. We went on a holiday. I enjoyed that. I, paid off this credit card, but then the debt accumulated in the next couple of years anyway. And then I had brought a new modular lounge for my family home. And I could never work out why I felt so, awkward with the lounge until a few months later I realized that I'm actually sitting on a lounge that money paid for. And there were things that I brought that I spent the money on that I later on had to get rid of because I knew where that money had come from. I know what happened to me to be given that money. And so I sabotaged it. Everything I didn't end up, a whole heap better off financially because the lump sum of money was still tied to my worth and how I got the money. So that was a really interesting thing for me, that I thought it was going to change my life, and then it wasn't until many, many years later that I understood. I didn't feel worthy of that money. I certainly didn't like the way that it came about, that it came into my hands, but it's what it was. But they don't teach you about how to manage, finances or a lump sum or, any kind of money, teachings and education about that. I didn't know what to do with this money, but I also didn't believe I was worthy of it because I knew where it had come from. I knew what had to happen for that money to come into my possession. So that's my little, spiel on victims' compensation, and probably a different spin to it. Maybe you've received some money from victims' compensation and you didn't, you just felt all sorts of different emotions with it. It's not just as simple as, here, have some money, go and feel better. There's actually a lot more emotions and feelings and different beliefs about yourself and about what you do believe you're worthy of that do come up, especially with sums of money. But yeah, that's my little thing for today on victims' compensation that you might not have known or that might be helpful to you along your journey. And because I share my healing journey in the hopes of contributing to yours and sharing truths and my understandings and how I have moved through my healing journey and grown and learned a lot about myself and become, a better person for it. But I had to do all of that myself. So I like to share it. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and you are significant because you are, and I love you because you exist.